Hey guys, what's up? So, recently I had to, I noticed a conversation going on underneath one of my videos, and after going through it, it reminded me of a subject that I actually wanted to talk about a while ago and didn't do, and this reminded me you should have done it, so I'm going to do it now. Because as somebody who likes researching martial arts and swords and sword making and all that, there are a couple of things that are being said over and over and over again that just aren't true and they get on my nerves whenever I see them, and this is one of those things. It all started with a conversation that went underneath one of my videos. It was an older one about basically about these type of swords. I was basically talking about, like, for people who want to learn how to use Chinese swords, if a sword like this is right for them, and I basically was saying that this a sword like a Hanjian may not be the sword for you, especially if you're just beginning to learn how to use them. Somebody under there was talking about Tangjian. For those of you who are wondering what Tangjian is, well, here you go. Sword that looks like that. Elegant, beautiful looking swords. I like them a lot. I hope to own one soon. But someone was talking about those and how the benefits of having a sword like that. And then somebody else came in, they were talking about the Tang Do, which pretty much look like that, but they have a single edge. They're the Do, not the Jian. Like this one here, which also looks gorgeous. But as you can see, this particular model, you will notice a ring at the end of the pommel. And the guy who was talking about it was wondering what was the ring for. Like, he was even saying, like, he likes swords, but he didn't really, understand the whole ring thing. He didn't really like the ring thing. Now, somebody else mentioned that the reason why the ring was there was for counterbalancing reasons, which isn't true. This goes back to what a lot of this is something I see a lot, whether they're talking about Chinese swords or European swords. I don't really hear this with Japanese swords, though. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said that. But it's usually this misconception that the pommel at the end of a sword is there to help counterbalance it. That's not really why it's there, guys. I mean, I am not going to say that the pommel or the fittings on the blade itself don't contribute to helping balance the blade out. They do, but that's not the primary reason why they're there. Usually pommels are there for decorative reasons, or maybe even for striking reasons. In case of the rings, the sword that I showed you earlier, well, that ring was purely decorative. There's plenty of examples like these ones here, where you just see plain rings. And there's been a lot of conjecture that they were mostly there just to hang the blades up in a warehouse somewhere, or someone who sells swords or sells knives, which is what Do are known as. They hang them up in their shop, and then they're just like, look at our wares. It's hanging here. It's an easy place to store them, especially since a lot of Dao didn't have scabbards anyway, and you needed a way to store them, so you just hung them on the damn wall, right? But they weren't there to counterbalance the blade. That's not why they're there. And in the case of the Tong Do, that's not what the ring's there for. It has nothing to do with counterbalancing. Could it help counterbalance it? Sure, but not by all that much, and not nearly as much as you would think it would. The overall fittings of the sword are going to help with the balance, and even then, a well-balanced sword will not depend on the fittings to help balance it. What makes a sword well-balanced is the blade itself. Yeah. Most people don't seem to know this about swords. They seem to think, there's a lot of dumb misconceptions about swords, period. We already know the dumb ones about katanas, that they can slice through everything, that they're the sharpest things around, which is not freaking true. Or the misconceptions about jian, that they're used like rapier. No, they're not. Or that, the rapier is much lighter than a normal sword. No, they're not. There's a lot of crap that said by people who don't handle swords, who don't study swords, who don't study the development. And the whole thing about the pommel is another one of those dumb misconceptions. So if it isn't the pommel, like I said, that helps with it, then what does? Well, I already gave you guys the answer. It's the blade. It's the blade that needs to be balanced. Well, how do you balance the blade without some counterweight at the end, right? Let me show you. Over here, let's take this sword first, because this might be the easiest to show you guys. This one's a model from Hanwei that they don't make this model this way anymore. It's a practical jian. They've since they've changed the hilt construction and all that type of stuff. But yeah, this is a really old model. Now I want you to notice something. I'm going to show you from here, right? See that, right? We're going to start from handguard here. I want you to look at the profile of the blade as I slide downwards, okay? You're going to notice, if you got eyes, that there's some tapering going on here. It's not as wide. Like here, it's that width. We go to the tip, it's that width. Less material here. That's profile tapering. You tend to see that on cut and thrust swords, or mostly thrusting swords. You know, it helps facilitate the thrust, right? Now look. Now let's look at the thickness. See that? See how thick it is? Hopefully you can see that. And as we slide down, look how thick it is at the tip. It's almost paper thin, which, by the way, is what makes this sword not that good for actual fighting, but whatever. Yeah, you notice that? Thick, thin. That's distal tapering. And that's the reason why a sword feels well balanced. There's less material up here. Now let's think about some basic physics. You want a sword to feel really well balanced in the hand so that you can get the point wherever you want. You usually have the weight balanced more toward the hand. Well, the easiest way to do that is to have more material at the hand itself. Well, the blade, believe it or not, without the fittings or a pommel, already has that because it's thicker here. There's more material here, so that means most of the weight is in this area. There's less of the weight here because there's less material. Distal tapering, that's what makes it feel balanced. Now, adding this and the handle and the pommel also adds more weight, but not nearly as much as you think. When I take the fittings off and I'm just going to hold it by the bare blade, I'm still going to feel more weight toward my hand because it's thicker here. The blade itself is balanced. The handle, when they made the handle in the handguard and all that, the reason why they made the handguard is to keep my hand from sliding onto the blade. The reason why they got the handle is so it's easier for me to grip. The reason why you got this particular part here is either for decorative reasons or because this could just be solid. There's no reason to have this hole here. This particular sword, they made it this way so I can hang a tassel off of it, but it also gives me easy access to the nut to disassemble the whole freaking thing. This is the end cap that closes the whole unit off. So it being a counterbalance is a secondary feature or an afterthought. That's not the primary reason why this is here. What makes the thing balanced overall is the blade. Let's take another sword, one that's a bit more quote-unquote battle-ready than, say, this one to kind of prove my point. Put this over here. Let's get my favorite one out. This Hansen here. Love this thing. Feels great in the hand. It was made for two hands, but I still use it with one because it feels fantastic in one hand. I can get that point where I want it. I can move the blade where I want it. Now, if we look at the profile, yeah, it's pretty wide, right? It's pretty damn wide. And as I slide down, we get some tapering. In fact, we get some rapid tapering like at the last fourth of the blade. Like over here is gradual, 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 and then boom, rapid. Which there's a funny story I'm going to tell you about later, which kind of has to do with the subject. But even with the sudden rapid change, like right around this point, it still keeps gradually going to a taper. Profile tapering. Again, because this is a sword that was made for cutting and thrusting. Now let's look at the thickness. Okay, this is how thick it is at the base. That's pretty thick, right? A lot of people don't expect them to be this thick, but yeah, they are, which is why they're not just thrusting swords. And as you can see, as we keep sliding down, it's getting thinner. It's getting thinner. So now we're at the tip, and while it's definitely not paper thin, it's still much thinner up here than it is over here. See? Distal tapering. And because of that, this thing feels like a joy in my hand. This I can get that tip where I want it. This is not blade heavy at all. Because once again, less material here than there is here. So most of the weight is toward my hand. The fittings here, again, since it's adding weight, it does help, but it's the blade itself which has more material here. This area here helps to balance it toward my hand, okay? Not all the weight is in the hand itself. And this is something else that I really want people to think about for those who are still trying to argue, well, the fittings really help out a lot. You seem to forget that if you've got a big, heavy weight, but the pommels aren't that heavy, guys. Think about it, this is like a 2-pound, 6-ounce sword. And most of that weight's in the blade itself. Now, if you're trying to tell me that the weight is evenly distributed into something like this, and it takes something like a pommel to counterbalance it, that pommel should be really freaking heavy. But this, I can tell you right now, this is just empty wood. This is a hollow piece of wood here, a small brass piece with holes, and then a rather light end cap. That's not going to counterbalance something if the blade itself isn't balanced. Besides, you seem to forget that the part here is much less, thinner material inside the handle than over here. So obviously, there must be a lot of weight in the blade in this area that moves it toward my hand. You gotta think. You really need to think about a blade's construction and where the weight is located at when you want to start talking about blade balance. The pommel, or in the Tangdao's case, the ring at the end, is not what's going to counterbalance it. It's the blade itself. Because I can guarantee you, if you look at the distal taper going on in a Tangdao, you'll see what I mean. And yes, single-edged swords also feature distal tapering. Now, unfortunately, I do not have a Chinese doll here to prove it, but I have something fairly close, and that's a Japanese katana, which I think it's kind of fitting considering that Tangdao helped to create what we see as the katana today anyway, so I think it's fitting. Here is nice looking, typical katana. Here's the fittings, you know, typical, you know, dragon-like fittings, black gray skin, all that good stuff you expect, right? Let's look at the sword. Now, this sword was made primarily for cutting. I think we can all agree. We look at the profile taper, pretty wide. And while it might be hard for some people to notice, it's not as wide up here. It's pretty wide here. Not so much here. So again, we got some profile tapering going on, which means less material. Now let's look at the thickness. Look how thick it is at the base. Okay? I'm going to slide down. Look how thick it is here. Now I'll admit, it's not dramatically less thick, but it is noticeable. Like I'd say, like they probably shaved a millimeter off or so, maybe 2 millimeters off. See? See? And because once again, there's less material up here than there is down here. So even though a katana was made for 2 hands, I've noticed that I can easily use this with one. It hasn't been hard for me. Like I've done some test cutting with these things and all that, and I got no problem because the blade is balanced. So the weight is more toward my hand. Now, the fittings don't add that much weight. They really don't. They add some. They help with the balance some, but not nearly as dramatically as you would think. And when you consider that, like, look at this. This is a hollow end cap. How can a little hollow end cap balance out this whole freaking thing? Now think of a ring at the end of the Tangdao, and you're trying to tell me that thing is going to counterbalance a whole freaking 2-pound or heavier sword? Think! The scuff here, it's hollow wood. This brass piece, you know, it's got holes and stuff in it. It doesn't weigh that much. And it balances quite well. It balances about, like, say, I'm going to lift up the side here. Look, I'd say about maybe 5 inches away. Almost 5 inches away. Okay. Let me see if I can try to get it closer to the camera so you guys can see. You see that, right? Look, it's around 4, maybe 5. Now I'm going to show you something, because I hope this proves my point even further. If you felt I haven't proved it by now, which I really think I have, but I happen to have that same model katana right over there. There's something different about it though, because here's the scar. Taking it off. Same scar, you know. Gray skin. All that fun stuff. Where is that handguard? I'm sorry, the Tsuba, I don't know what I did with it. I had it a moment ago. Now I feel like a dunce. Oh no, here it is. It was right here on the desk. Here, see? I'm taking that off too. Here's the thing. Now there's no fittings on it whatsoever. It's the same blade. Same solid blade. Okay? Same thickness. Okay? Same taper thing going on here and here and stuff. But now, what I'm going to do is again put this on the saya, right? Now, we had it so that the blade was this way, right? I don't remember. I think it was this way. Did I have it this way or did I have it this way? Well, it doesn't matter. As long as you guys can see it, right? What really matters is that you can see where it's balancing at. See, here's where the handle is. Here's where the handguard would be. And as you can see, I think maybe it added an inch, taking the fittings off, but not, it may be an inch. And I don't even think that much, maybe half an inch at that. And I can tell you, holding this with no handle, no handguard, all that, this still feels balanced in my hand, guys. This does not feel like a lead crowbar. I can still get the point where I want. I want it there. I want it there. I want it there. Let's point at the camera. You know, let's put it right there. Look, I can get the point where I want. This does not feel heavy or uncomfortable, at least weight-wise. I mean, it feels uncomfortable in the hand because I don't have a handle, but I think you get the point, right? It's not that huge a factor not having a pommel at the end. So, ring pommel being counterbalance? No, that's not what it's there for. Sword makers throughout the centuries of different cultures have understood that if you want the blade to feel more balanced in the hand, you make sure there's less material at the end and more material toward the hand. Basic physics. Basic blade geometry at work here. It's thicker at the base and at the tip, and that's what makes it feel balanced. It's not a freaking ring pommel. This has nothing to do with being narrow-minded, by the way, which is something that somebody was trying to accuse me of when I came in the conversation and said that, guys, that's not what it's for. I hate that term, by the way. I've been noticing that lately. When you point out that somebody's premise is completely, like, no, the facts point to a completely different direction. You're just being narrow-minded. Why don't you imagine what? I can imagine that unicorns created swords and the way we've been tempering it is with freaking unicorns' blood. Doesn't make it freaking true. The facts point to, it's a simple fact that in sword making, distal tapering, and making sure the weight is closest to the handle on the blade itself helps to balance the whole sword out. The fittings help to an extent, but the fittings are not the primary reason why the sword is balanced the way it is. If we're going to be going that route and trying to say that, oh, the only way you balance the sword out is with its fittings or with a ring pommel at the end or whatever pommel you're going to give it, then that pommel is going to be significantly heavier than they actually are. And they certainly wouldn't be hollow, as many pommels tend to be, especially a ring pommel. I mean, I really want people to think about this. A ring pommel. A circle is going to balance out a sword that weighs around 2.5 pounds or so. Think. I did not put this out here. I'm not trying to be a jackass. I'm not trying to, make people feel bad or anything like that. I just am asking people to think about the things that they're repeating that other people tell them. Some things simply don't make sense if you spend more than a few minutes thinking about it. I think another part of the problem is, and it's something that I've stated before, people who have not handled actual swords usually don't really know much about what it takes for a sword to be a sword, or how they actually function, what they feel like, the proper use of them, and so on and so forth. People who just, come up with a lot of conjecture about swords, all they've handled were like wall hangers or something, or they just drool at them on the internet. I'm sorry, if you don't really know anything about them, and if you certainly haven't researched the creation of swords and understand what goes into making a sword a good sword, then you really shouldn't be arguing with people that actually have an inkling of it. I'm not saying I'm some ultimate historian here. I mean, hell, I certainly don't know how to make these myself. And I know there are other people who know way more than I do, but the bit that I have been researching and the fact that I own several and I've taken some apart, put some back together, fixed a few, I now am in the business of helping to sell these freaking things. I think I know a bit about what it takes for a sword to be balanced and not balanced. And I'm sorry, but a ring pommel at the end of a tongue dial does not counterbalance it. That's not its primary function. It may help with the balancing, but the main thing that's going to make a sword balanced or not is how the blade was constructed. If you need further proof of this, the best I can tell you is to go out and find badly made swords. Like, You see this a lot with badly made long swords. How, you know, the sword, there's no tapering whatsoever. I see this in a lot of badly made long swords. There's no profile tapering or very little profile tapering and no distal tapering to be seen. And that thing feels like a freaking lead bat, like you're swinging around a sharp crowbar. But a well-made longsword, you know, if you're willing to spend at least $200, $300 or up, or if you're going to be getting one of the models made from Albion, and you must be making a lot of money to be able to grab one of those, there's distal tapering going on. You will see, I mean, you can look at pictures of a well-made sword and you'll see it's a lot thicker at the base, thinner at the top, at the tip. And there's a profile tapering going on and distal tapering going on. Because no matter whether the sword maker came from Japan or China or Korea or India or England or France or Germany or Greece, they understood that the less weight there is at the tip and the more weight there is at the base, the easier it will be to wield. The balance will be good on that sword. That's what balances out a blade, not the pommel, and certainly not a ring pommel. We can come up with all types of conjectures of what the ring pommel was. I mean, again, was it just decorative? Is it a cultural thing where people forgot why the ring was there? Is it for just hanging up on the sword? Is it for hanging a tassel on it or ribbons? Who knows? We could debate that a lot because we don't really know the answers fully yet, other than like how we've seen other people use it. But one thing we can say, because of what we know about making swords, the ring pommel is not a counterbalancer. Or at least it's not its primary function. And the same thing can be said for any pommel on any sword. And if there actually is a sword maker out there who is counterbalancing his swords with the pommel, then that guy has no freaking clue what the hell he's doing. It is what it is, guys. Again, this is not me trying to be an asshole. This is me trying to put out some real information to counter all the misinformation about swords. I mean, mainstream public, they never really handle swords. All they know about swords is what they see in the movies or read in books or see in video games. So yeah, I don't really fault them so much for not really knowing this stuff. But if you actually are into swords, like you're looking to practice with them or study them, you have a passion about it, wouldn't you want to know some factual information about them? That's what I'm trying to do. You know, when I put out videos like this, it's not me trying to be an ass. It's not me trying to rain on your parade. It's me just trying to look, this is what it takes to make a sword. This is one of the things that makes a well-balanced sword. The things you believe about it just aren't true. And if you take the time to do some research and look into it, you'll understand what I mean. And then maybe you'll have the same frustration I do when you start seeing people repeating the same thing. And then when you try to correct them, they want to argue the point. It really gets frustrating, people who they didn't do the research and they're trying to argue with you on something that it's obvious they didn't do the research on. And there's plenty of stuff out there to show that it's the blade geometry, guys. That's what balances the sword out. I'm repeating myself now, but I really hope I've made the point and hope this is entertaining enough for the people who are into this sort of thing. So that's it. Catch you guys later. Yeah, almost forgot. I actually promised a funny story about the rapid tapering on that Hangen. This is actually the first one that I got. And with this particular one, besides the tip damage, you will notice that with the profile tapering on this, it's pretty even. You remember the one I showed you earlier is, you know, there's a rapid, it suddenly rapidly tapers right around this point. Well, this one, it's not there. It's just a very gradual, you know, it's just a gradual tapering profile-wise from beginning to end. That's because when I first ordered this one, that's the way I wanted it. And the guy who I got it from, the guy who ran Jinshi, who still runs Jinshi, Garrett, he's like, are you sure you want it that way? And I'm like, well, yeah, because at the time I didn't really like that rapid sudden change, but that's because I was looking at really bad examples of it. There's better, more subtle looks, which this one had. And then as you can see with this one, then after I wanted to replace this one because of the tip damage, then I get this one, you see that rapid, you know, change. I really hope you guys can see it because it's rather subtle. But right around here, it just suddenly dips. Like, you know, you got gradual, 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 and it dips right there. Now, the funny thing is, like I said, this sword actually weighs more than this one. And this one also, remember, this is the first one without that sudden rapid change with the profile tapering. Look at the handle sizes. This handle is actually longer than this one. This is the one with the rapid change all of a sudden. So we now have a sword with, if the whole pommel and fittings thing is what determines counterbalancing, that's the reason why it was there, then that should mean that this sword here with the longer handle, which means more material, should make this one feel lighter than this one. It doesn't. This one actually feels heavier than this one. And some people who don't understand how swords are made are going to be going, why is that? Well, remember, this is the one with much less material at the end than this one. This one just had that gradual taper, profile tapering from one end to the other, while this one suddenly dips profile-wise here. Now, both these swords have distal tapering, but this one not only has distal tapering, but it also has profile tapering going on. Well, both of them have profile tapering too, but this one has that rapid change at this point. Like it just dips and it gets even skinnier. And the tip here is skinnier than this one. So there's less weight. This feels more balanced, even though this one weighs less than this one. So I think that should prove my point. I hope. Catch you guys later.